if a toad calls in the forest and nobody hears it, did it even happen? Today on Action Hour, I'm with WEAN founder Steve Erickson to talk about the western toad. The western toad is currently a candidate species for listing by Washington State and a federal species of concern, and is also a resident of Whidbey Island, and a special animal that you love, right, Steve?
Yes, I'm very fond of little warty fellows.
Yeah. So for people who have maybe never seen a western toad, can you describe what a western toad looks like?
Yes, they're pretty easy to recognize. They're the only toad in this area. If you see a toad around, then unless it escaped from somebody's aquarium, this is the only kind of toad you're going to see. Western toad, Anaxarus boreas. And you can distinguish it from frogs by the large glands behind its eyes. No other critter around here has that. And of course, they're warty. And if you go online, you can find pictures of them, all over the place. Just Google Western toad. And they're warty. Around here, they tend to have a light stripe down their middle of their back. And, if you see one, it should be reported to the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. You can go on their website, and they have forms for doing that, or report it to us, and we'll get back to you and get the information, and we'll do the report to Fish and Wildlife, because it's, they're hard to find. They're believed to be undergoing decline through significant portions of their range, which is the western U.S. and the western parts of Canada, from eastern Rocky Mountain slope on west. Recent attempts to relocate populations in the Puget lowlands that were known to exist before 2000 have mostly been unsuccessful. And indeed, old timers around here have talked about how, when they were growing up on Whidbey, every basement had a western toad in the window well. And just about every garden had one. And of course, now they are nowhere near as common. They're designated by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife as a species of greatest conservation need, SGCN, in the State Wildlife Action Plan, and as a priority species in the Priority Habitats and Species Program. And they're a candidate for state listing as threatened. So they're cryptic species. They're hard to find, and it's not just because they're rare. Most of their life cycle is spent in uplands, not in the wetlands where they breed. They're solitary. They hang out under leaves and logs, and they look very similar to leaves and logs. They've got small vocal sacs, so they're not real loud, and they don't call for mate attraction, unlike a lot of other anurans, other frogs and toads.
Oh, interesting.
The male calls may be territorial, but they're sporadic. So, you might spend a long time before you happen to hear one of them. In the breeding habitat, when they're breeding in wetlands, ponds, lake and stream margins, around here mostly wetlands and ponds, the males will climb on top of each other and try to mate. They get kind of frantic at that time. And then they make lots of...
They're going for whatever's moving. They're like, I'm just going for it.
Yeah. Then they make lots of what are called release calls, let go of me calls. And their calls sound like a chirp. They almost sound like a goose when there's a bunch of geese, when there's a bunch of them together on top of one another, and they're all doing their little chirps. In uplands, when they do them one at a time, they're pretty recognizable. You might mistake them for some kind of bird.
The first thing that I think about is like how a western toad scavenger hunt would be really fun, to go out in the woods and see if you can even find one. Because I live right by a wetland, and it's actually a recognized amphibian habitat, and I don't think I've
Mhm.
ever seen a western toad. I think all of the noise that I hear, because I hear the frog chorus at night, during February and March when they all start waking up, and I think they're all American bullfrogs.
That could well be. And let's see,
Which are
when
invasive, right? And American bullfrogs are invasive.
yes, with our invasive. If you
Yeah.
find one and you catch it, take it home, put it in your freezer for a while, kill it, or kill it on the spot. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people find that squeamish about that.
Or you
But
can
yeah,
report it to the Invasive Species Council too, because they are also
you should report it so they know where they are, but they're not going to do anything about it, practically speaking.
Mhm.
So back to Western toads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a question is, well, let me go through how Western toads got protected in Island County, because it's been quite a saga that took almost 10 years.
There's a reason that we're called the toad people by some. How did conservation happen in Island County for the Western toad?
Well, in 2015 to 17, the county was updating its critical area regulations, its fish and wildlife critical area regulations. It was actually supposed to do that in 2004, but the county kind of forgot. So in 2013, you got an order from the Growth Management Hearings Board that the county had to review and update its critical area regulations instead of waiting until the next regular 10-year review. And I was on the county's technical advisory committee for the update, which happened because the planning director at the time got a grant from state for the update. And in that grant application, they specifically named the organizations that were going to be on the technical advisory committee, and it included WEAN. So otherwise, of course, that never would have happened. So the county hired some consultants who do these kind of updates, and somehow they missed Western toad being a Department of Fish and Wildlife priority species and a candidate species, and being known to occur on Whidbey. How they missed that, I don't know, because you can go online and it's right there. That information's all right there on the Fish and Wildlife website. But under the Growth Management Act, that meant they had to be considered for protection. Now, consultants wanted to just protect the breeding habitat, which was already, more or less protected because it's in wetlands generally, wetlands and streams, and ignore the 80% of the life cycle that's spent away from the breeding habitat. We insisted those upland areas also needed to be protected. Ultimately, the county agreed to protect upland sites, but only those that were known by the date of the ordinance's adoption, which is kind of strange. It's a cryptic species. It's hard to find. Most locations on the island have been found incidentally. Somebody just, look at that, it's a toad. There's never been a survey. The county ordinance would literally have a county planner visiting a proposed development site, having a toad hop across their foot and not being able to consider it in the development and permitting the development because it's a new location. So, no other protected species was treated like that. Toads don't get no respect.
Well, so you're saying that like at the time they were like, okay, if we know it in this moment, it's in the plan for conservation, but any new sites aren't considered? Is what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly it. If it sounds kind of bozo, it was, and very weird. No other protected species is treated like that. It's all based on either finding them, what are called performance standards. It's like if you find wetland, it's protected whether it's already mapped or not. Same thing here. Every other species, if you see it and it's there, it's protected. If if it's mapped, great. But even if it's not, but they didn't want to do that with toads. With the Western toad, toads don't get no respect. In fact, at one planning commission hearing, I remember a planning commissioner going, "Toads, for God's sake, toads."
So
what can I say?
I'm wondering, like the dismissal of the toad, of the Western toad, and it not being respected. the way maybe other species are respected. I'm curious if you can kind of share what makes a Western toad special and how it functions in our ecosystems. Like
Okay.
why
So,
protect the toad?
yeah, probably a lot of listeners here have heard about the ongoing extinction crisis. And before you even get to extinction, the meltdown that's going on with wildlife populations around the world, both invertebrates,
Yeah.
insects, arthropods, and also with vertebrates.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and invertebrates, amphibians, that class has the most highest percentage of endangered species, of species that are threatened, of any other class of vertebrates. And there's probably a few reasons of that for that, but probably a prime one is they are incredibly vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
They absorb air and water through their skin,
Yeah.
so that if there's any toxins, they're easily exposed to them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when it rains now, as everybody probably knows by now, for instance, there's PFAS in the rain and
Yeah.
microplastics, and that it looks like maybe humans absorb a little bit of that, but probably not much. But amphibians are going to absorb a lot. So that's one reason. Another reason is, of course, just plain habitat destruction.
Yeah.
And again, the toads, Western toad on Whidbey and throughout the Puget Lowlands, which have been, developing rapidly with human developments,
Yeah.
are particularly vulnerable there because, when they breed in the wetland and the tadpoles metamorph into these tiny little toadlets that are about a half-inch long, and then they just disperse through the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to disperse at random. There's some questions about that, but it's not like, this little toadlet goes, that is the way I must go because my ancestors went that way. They just kind of disperse at random, which means they get filtered out by the landscape, by what's going on in the landscape. If they hit a road and, the toad tries to cross the road at the wrong time, swish.
Mm-hmm. So they're a really delicate. They're a really delicate and vulnerable species in a class of vulnerable animals, invertebrates, as you said, who are. Seems like the Western toad is a good indicator of ecological health or ecological degradation. That if the Western toad is no longer there, then that ecosystem has been impacted significantly. And it sounds like on Whidbey Island, especially based on the random dispersal that you're talking about, that the great increase in development has very specifically destroyed the Western toad.
That fragmentation, in this case, manifesting by vehicles running them over.
Vehicles the roadways. I saw it. This is kind of a non sequitur, but I saw a video online of salmon crossing, there was a very, very small, amount of water.
I've seen it. They'll just wiggle their way right across.
Yeah. And it's wow, that's talk about, an impediment to their whole life cycle is having to struggle across a roadway and not get hit by cars. It's just crazy. So I imagine for the toad,
there actually are people on North Whidbey where there's a population of toads who get together when the toadlets are going home or going down to the wetland and will even help them across the road. Ultimately, we'd like to know where they are well enough and know what the impediments to their travel are well enough so we can start putting in toad crossings.
Yeah.
Little underpasses for the toads. I mean, just like the big wildlife crossing on I-90 that's, sized for elk and moose and deer and grizzly bears and pumas and, critters and small ones. We just need some, small toad underpasses strategically placed, but we don't know where to put them yet.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. And so we don't know where to put them, but as you said, there are some communities that we do know of on the island. Can you tell us where those are?
There's some on the north end around Duquala Bay, around there. We know there's a population there. We know there's a population around South Whidbey State Park. And we also know there's a population around the area around Greenbank Farm. And that may actually be part of the same population as with South Whidbey State Park. The toads have been known to disperse as much as 6 kilometers from their breeding sites. So that's, in that range as the toad hops, I guess. So, it's quite possible those are to this location. In terms of what they eat, in Utah, they eat a lot of ants. Here, everybody kind of just assumes they eat the same thing other anurans eat when they're tadpoles, algae, vegetative matter, pretty much whatever they can kind of glom onto. And then when they're older, probably a lot of insects.
Are they omnivores then?
Are
they omnivores? So they eat both plant matter and...
When they're adults, I suspect the tendency is more towards a meat diet, insect diet. But, there's a lot that's not known about them. Actually, when you start getting those kind of nitty gritty details, there's somebody on Central Whidbey around Greenbank where they've taken up residence in their greenhouse. Every year they get little toadlets in their greenhouse, which must be a nice spot for them because they seem to like it. Yeah. And they feed them mealworms.
Oh.
So if you happen to have some toadlets take up residence in your greenhouse, they will eat mealworms if you give them to them, and they seem to thrive on.
So if you find, to that point, like if you're out on a walk and you find a western toad, definitely report it to us or the Department of Fish and Wildlife. If you find that you have like a toad population on your property, like what should you do for them? Feed them mealworms? What do you like? Obviously report it, but do you then?
Well, if you find it on your property, that means there's something right going on between your property and where they hatched out in the wetland where they came from, as when they metamorph from tadpoles to toadlets. So the intervening space in between there was favorable enough so they got to your place without getting wiped out. So my basic suggestion is report it, and if they're in your greenhouse, lucky you're probably going to keep a lot of insects down. And if they're just around, that's fine. Nothing really to worry about. There's a potential for dogs and cats to bother them. They are somewhat toxic, not as much as some other anurans.
So, don't pick them up, maybe?
Yeah, you really shouldn't pick them up. If you do, I'm less concerned about the human than the toad. I mean, wash your hands afterwards. But I would be more concerned about you giving them a disease, like a fungal disease, inadvertently. So, you might want to put on like latex gloves or something if you're going to handle them. But they're pretty distinct and they're pretty cute, I think. I think they're cute.
Oh, anyway. I think they're really cute. I've looked at pictures and they're a very adorable little toad.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the toad underpasses and how we don't know where to put them yet.
Well, let me go on here about how they got protected in Island
County. Yeah. Sorry, let's go back.
So the main issue. So we appealed. The county was only going to protect toads when they were already known before they updated the ordinance, and then any newly found sites wouldn't get protected for 10 years, assuming the county did their update on time, which historically has not happened. So we appealed to the Growth Management Hearings Board, and our main issue was that failure to protect newly found locations. But there were two other issues. Upland sites the county did designate were to be protected by using them as a trigger for a biological site assessment for any development within 1,000 feet. In other words, if you were going to do a development within 1,000 feet of a known location, you would have to do a biological site assessment. That now, as I already said, the toads go way more than 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
They are some hard traveling critters. The 1,000-foot requirement was from the first critical area ordinance in 1999, came from the recommended buffer for heron rookeries. It didn't really have anything to do with terrestrial wildlife generally, let alone western toad. And the planning director could waive the requirements to have a biological site assessment if the impacts of the development were minor. But of course, there's no definition of minor, and there were no sideboards on that at all. And how could you know, without looking at the situation, to know if the impacts would be minor? That's what the biological site assessment was for. So we appealed those two issues also, arguing the 1,000-foot radius around upland sites was not enough, and the biological site assessment requirement should not be, so casually waived.
Right.
We lost on all three of those issues before the Growth Management Hearings Board and in Superior Court. So we went to a state court of appeals, and it ruled the county had to designate and protect newly located upland sites. This seems like a no-brainer, but apparently this had never been argued before. So, the county can't wait until the next 10-year update. And that's actually precedential. The counties have to keep their protected species list and maps updated to be consistent with the state wildlife agency. But, honestly, I don't know of any other county that tried to limit the protection the way Island County did.
When you went to the Growth Management Hearings Board, you're saying that we lost on all three?
We lost.
But
we lost on those three issues.
But they said they did tell the county that they had to protect uplands, as discovered.
Yeah. I should clarify that a little bit. Yeah. This is a lot of back and forth that took years.
Yeah.
And the growth at first, the county wasn't going to protect upland sites at all. Okay.
Right.
So the Growth Management Hearings Board said, ruled you have to protect the upland sites as well. The county did, but it was only going to protect those sites that were known as of the date they adopted the ordinance.
Okay? Right.
And that passed muster with the hearings board. I won't get into all the arguments about why the hearings board thought that was okay and we didn't. But so we went to the Court of Appeals. They ruled in their favor that indeed all the upland sites have to be protected, whenever they're found. If they're there, you got to protect it. Okay. We lost on the 1,000-foot limit for requiring a biological site assessment around upland sites. I honestly think that, that probably had more to do with the just the concept of protecting really large areas.
I was going to say it's really difficult, even though it's it's best for the species. It would be very hard to have a 6-kilometer radius for. It
would be hard, but I'll get back to that later in a little while. We'll talk about what we want to do in the way of surveying for them.
Right, cool.
But we won on allowing the planning director to waive requirements for biological site assessment when impacts are minor. Court of Appeals found that arbitrary. And we ultimately reached a negotiated settlement on the language the county adopted to comply with the court's decision, which was, the first time in all these years since the 1990s, the county agreed just to sit down and negotiate some language. And it worked pretty well. And I'm particularly proud of the agreement regarding waiving the biological site assessment. We could have gone back and forth, dicking around about what is a minor impact. Back and forth on that. Instead, we came up with a, kind of a built-in mitigation requirement with sideboards about when you can do this instead of a biological site assessment that requires the landowner to plant native vegetation equal area to the area that they're going to, change from development. So, and put it towards the wetland or whatever the critical area was that's closest. And so, it's something a landowner can do. They don't have to spend thousands of dollars hiring a consultant. You don't have to go through a huge deal of, hiring somebody to try to find toads, which is real difficult, and it's, I think that kind of approach has a lot of potential. And there's good sideboards on it, so I don't think it'll be abused.
What do you mean by sideboard? What is sideboard?
Well, okay, so it only applies if you're more than 600 feet from the nearest critical area. If you're closer, you'd still have to do a biological site assessment. There's some regulations in there for agriculture specifically. And it's, I think there's protections in there that will keep it from being abused. And, I think instead of, a landowner having to hire a consultant for thousands of dollars, who's then going to draw up a mitigation plan, and everybody will be arguing about, is that enough mitigation? Is that too little? Where is it going to be? How's it going to be maintained? That's all just built right in.
If you're going to build, in these places, you have to create habitat for the toad, basically, like by native plants, by be so that you can cohabitate, you and the toad.
Yeah, if you follow the criteria there, you don't have to do biological site assessment. It can be waived. If if you still want to go through the whole 9 yards, you can if you want.
Right. But it creates an opportunity for people to follow guidelines that will help protect the toad and save them money, basically.
Right, and improve, the habitat generally.
Yeah.
So in all cases. So, I thought that was an excellent approach to that. And I'm glad we reached that decision. And I think, that kind of approach has a lot of potential in a lot of situations. There's still problems with protecting western toad on the island, and they seem to mostly be arising from logging. Okay. We had dealt with otherwise, there's another podcast on that. Yeah. And so that's still some issues there, but hopefully we will get those ironed out. As for where western toads are on Whidbey, I will let it out of the bag. The Department of Fish and Wildlife in November put out an announcement that they're putting out some pretty big grants, like a real big for this kind of thing, of $40,000 to $400,000 for work on species of greatest conservation need, rare species state. We looked real hard, because I've been thinking about this for a while, at using eDNA, environmental DNA, to try to survey the whole island. My conclusion on that was there are still problems with detection, because in a lot of wetlands on Whidbey, their toads are probably breeding in literally, puddles that are like maybe a foot deep or something, if they're there. So is that water going to flow out to a road where you can sample it, or to somebody who's got, a stream going, or the wetland? Because, remember, in a situation, like if you look through the literature on eDNA, most of the work's being done in large areas like national forests. If it's being done on marine environments, you're out in Puget Sound or the Pacific Ocean. So while, you can say, well, we'll contact landowners and get permission. Two problems there are, first, of course, some landowners are not going to, grant permission, no matter what you say to them. It's just the way it is. And that's their right. And also, it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. Yes. And also, the distance eDNA can be detected is highly variable, and it has to do with things like how the pH of the water that it's in, the DNA is in, how long it exists before it's degraded, the temperature, the distance in terms of dilution.
Yep.
And when you start looking at doing large areas, I for a while I kind of worked on putting together a proposal to develop protocols for larger scale surveys, pilot study basically, which is everybody says you really need to do with it. I think you really need to do with almost any study.
Yeah.
And my conclusion was just there's a lot of uncertainties. It would be very expensive.
Very.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very expensive and a lot of work. So kind of off the top of my head in that process, I also, happen to see what acoustic monitors, bioacoustic monitors, little recording devices you put out to record sounds of nature are now. And like the price compared to, 10 years ago or 15 years ago is like way lower. All that technology improved. So I included that, initially. And then when it looked like eDNA was not really going to do it or be workable, I've been looking much more closely at doing bioacoustic monitoring. And indeed, the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, or Center, is it? I think Institute, did a study up in Alberta when they were surveying the province for their amphibian populations, for their fauna, see what was there, and used acoustic monitors, and 11% of the time they detected western toads.
Oh.
So despite the chirps being pretty quiet, apparently they are detectable. Now, the current thing I'm wrestling with on this is how far away can you hear a toad if a toad makes a sound? Okay.
That's
a really ideally
good question.
Ideally, there would be a data dictionary online. I could just go look up, and somebody would have put a decibel meter 1 meter away from a western toad, and I would know how loud it was, and then I could calculate out how far away can you hear it if you've got an acoustic monitor that's this, of a certain sensitivity, of a signal to noise ratio and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't exist. So I'm currently reaching out to Northwest Trek. I already talked to Woodland Park Zoo, but Northwest Trek has an exhibit for kids where they've got western toads. About, just going and doing that. Obviously, in the wild, detection difference is going to be less. Detection distance will be less, but we'll have at least a theoretical maximum. So the idea here is to get enough monitors, acoustic monitors, so we can go to the populations that we know are there and kind of work our way out. How far away can we detect them from? How dense a monitoring network do we need? And there we can kind of work out the most efficient way, and then say, okay, if we're going to do the whole island, or elsewhere in the Puget Trough, elsewhere in the Puget Lowlands, how will we go about that? So here we're looking at less than a dozen monitors, but if we wanted to do a systematic survey of the whole Puget Lowlands in the next over 10 years or something, how many monitors would it take? How would they be arranged? How often would you have to visit them? All this kind of stuff that, is annoying, but, makes it much more efficient in the long range. And people are doing really interesting things with acoustic monitoring now. They're monitoring whole soundscapes and identifying species in them. They're using them to identify how restoration of an area is proceeding. It's just pretty much almost really everything being done with eDNA also. So this doesn't necessarily replace eDNA, and eDNA doesn't replace this.
No, but it's
kind of depends how they work together.
I really like this view, or this way that you're going about it. I asked Linda Rhodes about eDNA because I was reading about it, and she responded, gave me a huge scientific response to my question about it. And
It's complex.
what'd you say?
Pretty complex.
It's very complex, but she basically was like, she said specifically, in aquatic environments, dispersal can be more rapid and the target eDNA is effectively diluted quickly. So it's harder in, like, if you are in the breeding grounds for Western toad and you're trying to do a survey of them through eDNA, it might be harder to do. She was saying that it's like not, that it's not a cure-all. It's not like a magic bullet for,
No, it's not like we can just walk around all these things are kind of probabilistic. What you're trying to do is get maximum probability for detection and minimum probability for either not detecting it when it's there or thinking you've detected it when it is there.
Well, there's also the thing about the acoustic monitoring, which I think is really interesting, is the potential for citizen scientist interaction. I'm thinking of Merlin, the app. Like, birds are the one, in terms of acoustic monitoring, like that app is so good at detecting, different birds in the landscape. It's not perfect, right? It's not catching everything. It's not, but in terms of the calls, it's pretty accurate. And
yeah, I mean, it's not like we're going to be sitting there listening to hundreds of hours of recorders. This will go through automated software where we've identified Western toad chirps, and it's going to search for those patterns. And of course, we can also use this search for other organisms.
I guess in terms of a pilot project, because there are known locations on Whidbey Island, I don't know, were you thinking that you would start in the places where they are?
Yes, that's the idea here. So we can go, we're 50 feet away, we hear them fine. We're 200 meters away, we hear them fine. We're 500 meters away and we're hearing them. But are we hearing them in all monitors that are 500 meters away? The Alberta study was set up on a square, 500 meters on a side, with monitors in each corner. Okay. And so they reported Western toad. But that could mean that, and I've reached out to them to try to get more information, but that could mean that there was a toad directly in the center that was detected by all 4 monitors. That would be 350 meters. There was a toad near a corner and 1 monitor detected it. Or, there was a toad that was in one corner and the furthest away other corner also detected it. That would give us 750 meters. Which is probably getting near the limit of detection if you do the noise equations, so the volume equations. So there's some issues there, but the idea here is to come up with enough information so we can say if we put monitors in this arrangement, we do an array of monitors in this arrangement at these distances, we have a 90% plus chance of detecting. We got a 50% chance of detecting if they're there, and it gets kind of probabilistic, but, that's just the way it is, practically speaking. And, because it's an acoustic monitor, for instance, in their upland sites, you'd never find that using in aquatic DNA, environmental DNA, aquatic system. And, you're not going to stand there. Maybe it chirps once a month. Who knows? But with an acoustic monitor, you can literally put it out there for a month, and just come back.
It doesn't require you. I think it's so cool because it doesn't require visualization and it doesn't require you to be there all the time. Like if you can set it.
I mean, ideally, if you've detected, then you can go and start trying to pin down exactly where it is. But here's a really fun thing now. Acoustic monitors. A lot of people have been looking at how you can do acoustic monitoring and also do locations other than just, put a monitor up and we heard it somewhere that away.
Like give it a longitude and latitude. Yeah.
Just like with, like a GPS. And so there are monitors now being produced that have that are GPS enabled. So it gets kind of complicated. You have to have at least 3, of course, to triangulate. And of course, whatever the sound is, you have to pick it up on at least 3 monitors. but you can literally locate where that call came from pretty
That's pretty
exactly.
cool. You have like a whole map of toad locations. Do they question, what do these monitors look like and how would you set one up and how invasive is it for like, so for example, if you like set one up on someone's private property, like what's the impact, or if it's in a public park?
So the ones we're looking at, and just to let the cat out of the bag here, we bought our first monitors yesterday.
Oh,
I've been doing this, and of course, the two main, there's kind of three main sources of monitors. One is an outfit out of Australia, one is a company out of Massachusetts, and the other is company out of England, out of the UK. And those are the ones out of the UK they're not totally homebrew, where you're doing a lot of work on them, but they involve a little soldering and a little drilling. Those are the cheapest for obvious reasons then.
and how big are they? Like, what do they look like?
They're like about, a couple inches thick, and like maybe about 8 inches by 8 inches, 8 inches by 6 inches.
They're small.
They're
They're not
tiny.
big.
They're tiny, and you're recording onto an SD card, onto a micro card. And they'll run for, literally hundreds of hours on batteries. And they're, let's see, the ones out of Massachusetts, I think, have a kind of green camouflage case. The ones out of Australia have kind of a tan camouflage case. I mean, I could easily see, a lot of people could just walk right by them. They're on a tree or something and not even see them. So, there's various things to test here. They include, how high off the ground should they be? Do we get better reception if we go through the hassle of taking a pole and putting them 20 feet up in a tree? Or are we better off having them at chest height? So there's all kinds of questions like that to work out.
But you're
and they're not really that expensive. The ones out of Massachusetts are about $950 each for the GPS enabled ones, and the ones out of Australia are about $350.
Right. So they're pretty affordable. I mean, I think the thing. Yeah. So you're applying for a grant,
and by comparison, a single eDNA analysis, not counting the other gear you need like the sampler and stuff and the pump, a single analysis runs about $100. If you start looking at, we're going to do 100 or 200 analyses. I mean, if we'd been ready to do the whole island and we'd done the pilot study with eDNA and we now knew how many samples we need to do the whole island, then, that $40,000 to $400,000 range on the DFW, Department of Fish and Wildlife grants, is probably right in the ballpark there. But, the acoustic monitors, I mean, you can get hundreds of them for getting into that range and cover a very broad area. It's not to say, going back with eDNA is not also, a valuable exercise, because you can do what's called eDNA meta barcoding, where you're basically picking up every organism in that sample.
Right. So in terms of like value proposition, if you were using eDNA and you were picking up like a whole bunch of a range of samples, you could get an analysis on not just the western toad, but like a lot of other species in the range. But it is 1-to-1. It's like you have to you pay for each analysis of eDNA, whereas with the acoustic monitoring, if you have the equipment and it's working and you set it up, you can do that analysis over an extended period of time. And the labor comes with like, you have to have a person to get the SD cards to make sure that the batteries are, functional and that all of the
and then doing the analysis.
And then doing the analysis. Yeah.
So neither of these approaches, remote sensing approaches really is what they are ideal or perfect, and they're both rapidly developing. So I think together, over the long term, we're going to see a lot of work using these together.
I want to go through the different toad calls.
Western toad, Bufo boreas.
What's that first one?
That first one at the end, it was a single, but the rest of the time it was a bunch, and this was certainly a bunch of them. There you go. So yeah, that was both single and get off of me.
Was that a get off of me?
At the end there, that was a single, but there were lots of them in there that were, where it starts sounding kind of cacophonous.
Yeah.
And like there's and I've heard clips where it really does sound like a flock of geese. If you're walking in the woods and you hear a flock of geese at ground level, then you're probably about to be a voyeur at some toads that are mating, so.
That's really funny. I like the way they sound. They have a nice sound. They're like, it's not unpleasant to listen to, some things are unpleasant to listen to, but it's kind of a nice little chorus going on there. I want to ask you a question about the life cycle of the Western toad, like when in the year they spend time in the uplands, when in the year they spend time in the wetlands. And you said they travel far distances. And so I just kind of want to get a sense of the toad's timeline for life cycle.
Probably, I'm guessing around here, this area, because it's pretty temperate. I mean, we haven't even really had a hard frost this year. And of course, that's increasingly the case. Mm-hmm. But I expect that they probably make their way down to breeding habitat anywhere from around now, maybe to, late February. Mm-hmm. And again, to some extent, I'm guessing here because, nobody's been out there really looking at them that closely.
Right.
The tadpoles will take varying amounts of time depending on the water temperature, but 2 to 3 months. And if you see a bunch of tadpoles in deeper puddles or ponds where the tadpoles are all black, there's no mottling on them at all. This is totally black, no mottles at all. And that's Western toad. And another interesting thing about that is they seem to school. They seem to form schools that will act just like fishing schools. You know how fishing schools will all change direction at the same time?
Yeah, they're like synchronized.
Same kind of thing. And there are also reports that the schools are composed of offspring from only one female. Is, again, interesting in terms of genetics.
Yeah.
When you think about that coupled with, do they just disperse randomly, and then, when they become toadlets in 3 or 4 months and the landscape kind of filters them out, over. So, it raises a lot of genetic questions.
I was going to say, like, how likely is it, especially if Western toads are honestly humping anything that moves, that you might end up, I don't know, copulating with a family member?
That's an interesting question too. I mean, I don't, I've been looking a lot and in literature, and I haven't come across any studies that looked at for Western toads specifically, looked at the, kinship, if you will, the how closely related they were in a single, breeding site
Yeah.
or population. I mean, I suspect that they probably have some kind of metapopulation structure, which is to say there's not like one population here and then one here, and then one here, and they don't really interact much at all. Probably you get, a lot of separate subpopulations that interact over time. 1 year, one toad makes it all the way over there where, they can get it on with are established. They can get it on with, toads from another subpopulation.
Right.
So they do seem to have really high fidelity to their natal wetlands. I've seen that. I was doing some work out on the Olympic Peninsula for a couple of years and staying in a campground over there. And both years, almost on the same day, a western toad came through the campground on the way down to the river. Within literally feet of where it had been the year before. Both times my dog found it.
Yeah.
And, I over and she's there and her head's cocked quizzically and she's looking at this thing, and, she knew enough apparently not to, put it in her mouth. So, but, because they are toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. That was Tacoma. Tacoma found them?
Tacoma, yeah. And so it's they seem to have high fidelity to their travel routes and their natal wetlands.
Okay. And how long do they live? Like, what's the lifespan of a western toad?
Let's see. I think I was seeing some stuff regarding pet toads, like maybe 10 years.
Okay. That's a pretty...
So they can live for a good length of time.
Mm-hmm.
How long they survive in the wild's question. I wouldn't expect it to be anywhere near that much, but 4, 5, 6 years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's got to be huge mortality when you consider. I mean, the eggs are laid in strings, but you just think about how many eggs a female is laying, and there are hundreds or thousands of them, and then they hatch out as tadpoles and morph into toadlets, and where there can be lots and lots of them. And that's true for a lot of amphibians, of course. I was in Convoy National Wildlife Refuge once surveying a rare plant, and somebody from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service came by, and they were about to leave the area. It was their last day. It was like at late afternoon, and wanted to show me a site where spotted frogs, Rana prediosa, had not been reported, and said, "You reported? Okay, I will." And I went back with him to the site, and it was, literally every square foot at least had a little frog hopping along on it, with the rare plant I was surveying showing up there too at the same time. So you had rare frogs with rare plants together.
That's pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. Yeah. But so they're, they must have awesome mortality. Some corvids eat them, don't seem to be affected by the toxins. Badgers eat some toads, but we don't really have badgers around here. But so there's got to be humongous mortality when you think about the thousands of eggs down to where you get, a few adults, really.
Right. I was going to ask, what's the statistical likelihood of an egg becoming a full adult western toad? Do we know?
And that's kind of what I see our task as, is doing basic science work here on where are they, where are they in the landscape now? Why are they there and not somewhere else? Because it's really easy to jump to conclusions on this and say, aha, in this location where they are, there's a lot of down logs. So it must be because of mow down logs in this other area. But is that really why, or is it because when the toadlets went hopping in that direction randomly on that particular day, a car came by and swished them?
Right. We don't understand the
Or
variable.
a crow ate them that day.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of chance involved here too. So basically, I see our task as kind of making the landscape more friendly, and they'll do the rest.
Making the landscape more friendly, I think, is a nice way to put it. And I think that, that being the kind of like goal of the study, to be like, why are they going where they're going? What are they doing? How's it going for them?
Right. Well, phase 1 is the pilot study, being able to detect them.
Yeah,
Phase
can we
2
detect them?
is where are they?
Yeah.
Let's find them. Phase 3 is, what do we do about all this?
Right. So phase 1 is, can we detect them? Phase 2 is, where are they? And 3 is, what can we do about all of this? Is that what you see?
Yeah.
How long do you think a study like this, like assuming that we're able to get grant funding, which would be awesome, how long do you see phase 1 lasting?
Okay, I think we can do that this year if we're just doing acoustic monitoring. It'd be great to also add some eDNA sampling, but I don't know if we'll have the wherewithal to do that. But yeah, we should be able to do phase 1, as it were, of what's involved in detecting them, what's the most efficient way. Then phase 2 would probably be next year, and involve a lot more monitors and people power and organizing people to go out throughout Whidbey and systematically start seeing where can we detect them. And then phase 3 is getting into where do we need underpasses? Why are they here, not there? And just monitoring over time. Because if they're, if they have a metapopulation structure, butterflies have metapopulation structures a lot. They'll have lots of little subpopulations, and they kind of interact sporadically so they don't get inbred. But you expect in those kind of population structures to see subpopulations weak out and then get recolonized. So that's what you would expect to see happen. So that takes monitoring to see if it's going to happen. So yeah, in 20 years, maybe we'll know an awful lot. But hopefully before that, we'll be getting into where do we need towed underpasses.
Right.
That's something we usually do something about.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you talk about that, because I think that like phase 1 how can we actually hear where they are? And then phase 2, where are they? I think at the point of phase 2 of where are they is when you can be like, well, here are the concentrations that we found. Here's where we can put towed underpasses. But in terms of like having a larger data set for this species that seems to be very understudied, it would probably take at least 10 years to have any good set of data based on whatever markers you're looking for. I mean, that's with the what do you call it? The kelp monitoring program, which is a very cool program that we have, that we did an episode about. They're just coming up on their 10-year mark of monitoring.
And think about what would be involved in following a toadlet from a wetland, on up to upland habitat. Real difficult. Though I have to say, I came across one study from last year out of Europe where somebody has developed a very small VHF transmitter that is, despite its smallness, it can pack enough power in the battery to be detectable for about 6 to 9 days.
What is VHF?
So actually, very high frequency transmitter.
Okay.
Not like in the radio collars. I don't know anybody radio collars veterans. But, so this, again, is a really promising new technique for tracking them, over at least short distances and short periods of time. So, you end up with kind of an integrated system where you're monitoring on a large scale through eDNA. Where are they? Who else is there? Kind of on a broader area. Then on a more detailed area through acoustic monitoring of, we know where they're breeding. We know, at least in some cases, where they are in the uplands, and then trying to, fill in that space in between. How are they getting from, their to the uplands. Well, wood toads are going, wood toadlets are going another direction, where if, we, put an underpass in, they would be able to, disperse that way to other habitat that's suitable. So there's more occurrences in the landscape, which again, buffers them from extinction, which is ultimately what we're after here.
Right. So buffering, like end game is buffering the western toad from extinction on our island.
Doing what we can about the things we can do something about. On, the kind of micro scale of Whidbey Island, we can't do a lot about climate change, in terms of how we could ameliorate that for toads. It'd be hard unless we start getting into, it's all a zoo and we're going to feed them and we're going to water them and stuff. And there might be some of that. We might be forced to resort to that at some point. But, in terms of roads and cars running over them, which is, a well-known phenomena, that's something we can do something about.
Yeah, roads are something we can do something about.
So where this all kind of comes together again in terms of protecting them from the regulatory standpoint, that legal domain is, we can have, areas that are protected, and then we can have areas where there's kind of, increased focus on enhanced sensitivity that we want to say, okay, so if you're going to build a house here, let's see, if you put your driveway there, there's still, a corridor they can go through. If you're going to log and you leave maybe, instead of the 2 down logs per acre that's required under state law, you leave 12. We think they can pass through that. So we can start looking at these kind of tweaks,
right, to create pathways.
Are not huge, no one of which is really big in and of itself, but additively, they really make a difference.
Yeah. I think that this is, I'm very excited for the potential for this project. And I think that, being able to create habitat corridors will be great for the western toad and for other species on our island, for biodiversity in general, which is something that we need to protect, in the face of climate change. I also think that, the wildfires happening in California, it's just wetlands and riparian areas and other ecosystems, contiguous habitat helps to protect against the spread of wildfire.
Yes. And, in response to the planning commissioner who went, toads, my God, they're protecting toads. I can only say, respond with something from E.O. Wilson, the biologist who now dead, who had his problems, but was one of the co-developers of the theory of island biogeography, and really discovered chemical ecology, co-founder of that whole field, and sociobiology, for which he was roundly criticized at the time. But one thing he said was, it's the little things that make the world go around. And that's true. So we're, as humans, of course, we identify with big vertebrates that have big eyes and, we regard as beautiful. I mean, it's easier to get money to, do a study on grizzly bear than it is to get money to do a study on toads.
Yeah.
Or probably even dragonflies, But the reality is we need to start looking at a much finer scale at what's going on around us.
Yeah, we do. And I like that quote. It's the little things that make the world go round. I think we have to, if we can be sensitive and pay more attention to species like the western toad, we can do a lot of good holistically. Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate you taking time to talk about the Western toad and its importance and its conservation status on the island. And hopefully we can get a study going this year that will tell us some more about the health of this really important little guy.
Another man up in the pulpit in the State House. Head of the table with a black pen, scratching egos, talking too loud. Externalize every outcome, every warm gun, every profit. And kneeling down to the flashing numbers, the NASDAQ, the cold constructs. Running backwards to just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. Unlearning every lesson that our mothers tried to teach us.
This podcast is a production of the Whidbey Environmental Action Network and is made possible by our generous donors. Produced, edited, and mixed by me, Amanda Bullis. Special thanks to Marianne and Steve for their years of service through action and for lending their voices to this podcast. To WEAN's Executive Director, Marnie Jackson, and our board for their leadership. Special thanks to Whidbey musician and WEAN board member, Nathaniel Talbot, for letting us use his track, Intuition, from the album Animal, available on Bandcamp. Recordings of Western toad calls from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Volume, confidence against the idea of your body being put into your own hands. So please don't hold it, please don't hold it, please don't hold it back. Unleash the power, the straight logic of compassion. What I need now ain't that old religion or the cold hard facts. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Stepping out of the shadow of a false man's allegory, slowly erasing that old violence from the story. Recoupling emotion, slow emotion to intelligence, granting the planters, healers, teachers, feelers a new relevance. What I need now ain't that old religion or the cold heart